honestly, how fitting is the artwork of this card for this conversation? I think it's just freaking hilarious. Like, the artwork pretty much just like tells the story of my emotions through this entire process. So without further ado, guys, I thought we'd talk about these two cards and kind of just give you my feedback and share with you what I'm dealing with PSA. And yeah, just kind of go into it a little bit. So if you guys are just following the story, I'll link the other videos, part 1 and part 2, in the description below, so you guys can kind of just, you know, follow through and see what happened leading up to this point. But long story short is, last summer I got a parcel back, a massive parcel back from PSA, and both of these cards actually came back as PSA 5s. And my brother and I thought that was a little weird, so we went through the process of cracking both cards out and examining them with you guys, and kind of just going through every little point in detail, front and back, of both cards. And we couldn't find any issues, so, you know, we waited until we were able to resubmit them with PSA. And we resubmitted them. We cracked them out, obviously resubmitted them, and we just got them back a few days ago. And one came back a 10, one came back a 9, and they were PSA 5s. So the larger conversation here is, how did that happen? And why is it happening? And has it happened to you? Has it happened? Is it just happening to me? What's going on at PSA? So, you know, I'm again, to preface this, my entire collection is built around PSA. I do a lot of PC grading. I'm surrounded by PSA cards. I love PSA. I love their slabs. I like collecting PSA, and I'll probably never collect anything else. That's just my take on it. My collection is built around it. I don't want CGC cards in with a set that has all PSA or mostly PSA. It just doesn't make any sense to me. So PSA is what I'm collecting. So obviously PSA has gone through a lot of changes over the past, 2 years, and demand's been through the roof, and cutting them a little bit of slack. Probably most of their employees now are quite green. They've probably only been there for maybe less than a year. And maybe most of them haven't graded, Pokemon or even foreign cards or whatever it might be. So there is that aspect of slack where they have a reason, an excuse, so to speak, to maybe not be grading these cards as thoroughly and as well as they used to. However, this is kind of where my frustration leaks out is, and why I made such a large stink of this, because so many people, I got so much hate when I released those first 2 videos, part 1 and part 2. Mostly because people thought I was just essentially complaining about grades that I received, and who doesn't complain about grades they receive? There's times where the complaining is probably justified, and there's also probably times where you're just moaning and pouting about a card that really is a PSA 7 or a PSA 8. It's not a PSA 10. And, I think that's where a lot of people are coming from. They were looking at the situation going, dude, you're not above PSA. You're not above anyone else. You're a hobby grader like, most of us, and you are probably wrong, and PSA is probably right. There's probably something wrong with both cards that deterred them to PSA 5. And, I think the point I was trying to make by cracking those cards is that PSA is just being too inconsistent. I think that's the major, the overhanging point that I'm trying to make with this video series, is that PSA needs to be held to a higher standard. PSA is the biggest and the best when it comes to grading options. Their cards sell for the most. They're the most respected within the hobby when it comes to trading cards, and they're viewed as the leader in this space. And there's no way, and this is kind of where I'm coming from, is that there's no way that you should send in a card twice to get the correct grade. There's no way. And wait a year plus to get that grade? It doesn't make any sense to me. These two were not PSA 5s. I review all of my cards prior to sending them in. I mean, sometimes I do miss, dings and dents, and I get that. But it was just highly unusual that both of these cards, and Japanese cards, it's actually quite easy to grade Japanese cards PSA 9 and 10. And it's honestly, it's very easy to grade modern cards to PSA 10. I mean, they're just, modern cards are just printed much better. It's very easy to get 10s. It's just, that's the nature of the beast. Foreign cards in general are just super easy to grade in 10s. That's just how it is. The printing quality is much different than here in the US, and they also use, different print styles, or I guess textured card stock. The card stock is much different on some of these foreign cards. This is probably a bad example because they do have English backs, but you know what I'm getting at. And, for me, it's like, for anyone that knows or has been trained as a grader, you should be able to look at corners, edges, surface, whatever it might be, and determine whether or not a grade is essentially what it's being perceived as. And I think really what got me was that when I messaged PSA actually stated that 3 people, not 1, not 2, 3 people separately looked at these cards and determined that the grade that they gave me was the grade that was these 2 Munch Pikachus. And so, I wrote back to PSA after I got these cards back, just kind of, letting them know that this had happened. So if they need to look back and figure out who graded that first parcel, they can do so to help their quality, to help their consistency. But my point here is that how the heck did you get 3 separate graders to grade both of these cards 5s, and then the second time around get 3 separate graders again to grade 1 a 10 and 1 a 9? That's incredibly inconsistent. Now, I said in the part 3 that if these cards have received a 5, a 6, and I'll even admit now a 7, that okay, there is some consistency there. Like, that's kind of within the margin of error. But this is way outside the margin of error. This is 5 points higher than what it graded initially. This is 4 points higher than what it graded initially. And again, we're paying all of this money. And I made this point to some friends that I was talking to as well, is that the 2 PSA 5s that I received back, their total value, give or take, is about $750, $800-ish. And this card alone, now that it's a PSA 9 mint, is worth more than those 2 PSA 5s were that I got back this summer. And these are the same exact freaking cards. This is a $1,400 card roughly, and this is a $800 to $900 card roughly. So see what I'm getting at? It's like, because PSA is not doing their job correctly, it sows doubt within the hobby that they're actually grading these cards professionally, that they're actually having people that understand what exactly, a perfect 10 looks like, or what, good, clean surface looks like, or edges, or, edge wear, like how to grade edge wear. These things are very technical, but the thing is, like, these cards are like minty fresh. Like, there's nothing wrong with them. So just as at a base level, it's like, how did these even get 5s? I think that's the larger question, is like, how did these get 5s? I mean, guys, another great example here is I got this one back in a more recent parcel, this Jump Love, and this card is minty fresh. I mean, minty fresh. There are no issues with this card. Any white specks, that's dust. It's just been literally sitting on my desk for the past few weeks. But this is another great example. Like, this got a PSA 5. Like, again, a PSA, like, the damage scale for PSA starts at 6. So what you're telling me is that this card is beyond damaged. Like, this card is beyond, damaged. There's something more than wrong with this card. And that's just not the case. I'm not seeing that. We're going to crack it out and maybe go through the same process. I don't know. But my point here is that, like, PSA, we shouldn't have to do that. PSA should be able to get this within the margin of error, which I think is, the margin of error should be really 1 grade. So, like, people regrading 9s to possibly get 10s, that's acceptable because, depending on who's looking at the card, they might see something as being less flawed than other people. Like, this is within margin of error. I think these cards, one being a 9, maybe could regrade that for a 10. This one right here, send it back in, probably would stay at 10. But I think 1 point is within margin of error. But 5 points, going from a 5 to a 10, that makes no freaking sense. How does it happen? It doesn't happen. It shouldn't happen, but it did happen. And that's my point here, is that PSA, the community needs to get behind this, and we need to hold PSA to a higher standard, because it's going to literally ruin the reputation of PSA and Pokemon grading specifically. You know, it's not good for the hobby that I got back a Gem Mint 10 and a Mint 9 on 2 cards that were PSA 5s, graded PSA 5s initially. Like, I'm very happy that I got a 10 and I got a 9. These are probably the correct grades in my opinion. You know, this one's slightly off-centered, Dieter's it from a 10. This one's literally perfect front to back. But these should have been the grades initially. This should not have had to have been regraded. So anyway, if I do make one more video on this topic, it's going to be probably surrounding PSA and the response to like my email in regards to this whole 8-month debacle, because I really think that they need to, you know, figure something out around grading strategies and consistency. And I only hope that grading consistency does get better over time as these new people that they're hiring do learn the process and start seeing these cards more often, and become comfortable, you know, grading. But the thing, you know, again, is just, oh, guys, the thing that frustrates me is that they said 3 freaking people looked at each card and gave them grades individually. How does that happen? That's supposed to stop this kind of stuff from happening. But how did 3 people look at both of these cards and say these were 5s? And now 3 people again looked at these cards and said they were a 9 and a 10. That's what I don't understand. That's where I think PSA is really lying to us. I don't think 3 people are looking at these cards. I think one person, because they have so much backlog, is looking at these cards and going, corners, boom, this. Surface, boom, that. Edges, whatever. It's centering, this and that. And that's what they're deducing, is from that one person, if they're super new, if they're super green, if they're having a bad day, the grades are being determined by one person. Again, I don't have any evidence to speak of this, but it just doesn't make any sense to me. So anyway, I know this has been a long-winded video. We just need to start conversation around around this whole topic, because we do need to hold our kind of our grading leaders to a higher standard and make sure that they're doing the best job possible, because stuff like this is actually really bad for the hobby. It's horrible for the hobby. Yes, it's exciting that, you know, they did grade them correctly the second time around, but it should not have happened to begin with. And, you know, like this jump off example, this is another one that I think they really missed. And I can't tell you like how many cards that I've gotten back, you know, like this Alakazam right here. PSA 7 Alakazam. I know these are really tough cards to grade in general because of the Masaki lines, but the Masaki marks, but there's literally nothing wrong with this card. The centering's really good. There's no edge wear. There's no scratching on the foiling. There's nothing wrong with it. And somehow this got, you know, a 7. Like, I don't, you know, is this another one I'm going to have to go back and cut out and re-examine? I just don't know. It just shouldn't be happening. You know, again, I think like a 1-point margin of error is acceptable, maybe even 2 points. But if we're, you know, guys, if we're just this far off, it's not good for the hobby. It's really not good for the hobby. And I just don't want that. I love PSA and I want PSA to do the best they can, but I feel like we're not getting the best they can right now. And that's all I got. Take care.